A question that's often put to me is what's next? I'm asked as a Christian preterist, as a teacher, and as a man. See, fulfilled eschatology is what I believe in. It's the idea that all things pertaining to the end times were fulfilled in the first century. This is preterism. But I understand why it's put to me what's next, because as the book of Proverbs 13:12 reads, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. See, when you accept that all prophecy is fulfilled, it's natural to wonder what is next. And quite honestly, I can look you in the eye and tell you, I do not know. Because I can't speak to the future with certainty. And that's okay. Because I don't lead my life by certainty, but by faith alone. So my advice to you is to still your heart and feel the water. Is it lukewarm? Is it hot? Is it cold? Make that your interest. Because if you jump online right now and research the end times, you will find thousands of videos full of false prophecies regarding the end. One of them in particular that stuck out to me was Ken Peters addressing the Prophecy Club in a video titled I Saw the End, or I Saw the Tribulation. And in it he outlines this horrible dream that he suffered, and you can tell this had a profound effect in the trajectory of his ministry and obviously his eschatological beliefs. But, God's revealed to me the place of prophecy and how it was fulfilled in the first century. So whatever Ken's dream was about, it didn't depict the future outworking of Revelation as he thought it did. His discernment was off. Now, of course, it's a common thing to find yourself in a state of awe, unsure of what your next step should be as you navigate a spiritual walk. And this is where I advocate being a slave to Christ. And I advocate it because otherwise you leave yourself open to the bait of Satan. Now, I've met many people who have been repelled by the phrasing of that, slave of Christ. I once mentioned it to a girlfriend who reacted like a skewered serpent at its utterance. You should have seen her. She just, But I understand. I'll get to the sympathetic part. But, you see, I believe that human beings are most free and alive in relationships of love, and that's not necessarily romantic love, but Christian love, that which denotes the disciple of Christ. See, we become ourselves in love, and yet healthy love involves mutual service. It involves a mutual loss of independence, or as C.S. Lewis eloquently puts it, love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least the risk of tragedy, is damnation. See, but I'm sympathetic, okay? As I'm sure this video will attract atheists, I just want to say that I understand how when you hear slave of Christ, there can be certain negative connotations conjured up in your imagination. And of course, when you think about a relationship with God, you might wonder if that's inherently dehumanizing, because surely you're the one that's giving up something, you're giving something away to come into God's will, right? God is the divine being after all, he has all the power. So you're going to have to adjust your ways, and there's no way that God could ever adjust to you or serve you. But that's the thing that people fail to realise about the Christian God. It's not a concept, it's not a moral list of imperatives, it's a relationship. It's personable. It's a personable relationship with a living God. See, freedom is not the absence of limitation and constraints. It's far from that. It's about finding the right ones. It's about those that fit our nature and liberate us. See, both sides must say, I will serve you even if it involves sacrifice. If only one person is doing the sacrifice and giving, then the relationship will be exploitative and it will be oppressive, and it will distort the lives of both parties involved, and that's not going to be pleasant. See, in Christianity, God isn't divorced from humanity. Okay, if you look through human history, you will see the presence of God. God has adjusted for us through the atonement. As it says in Corinthians, God's redeeming the world through himself. He's redeeming the world to himself through Christ Jesus. Jesus was the Messiah, okay, this king that washed the disciples' feet. The one that said, I will serve you, though it means a sacrifice for me. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And if he's done this for us, we should and we can do so for him and for others. See, it's just like Paul says, the love of God constrains us. So this moral, spiritual reality that allows us to thrive then is this love, and that love is the most liberating freedom loss of all. As Christ told Peter, the sons are free indeed, and there is great freedom to act, but as Paul outlines later, not all things are expedient. See, it's not simply a joyride, but it's certainly underscored by joy. See, a Christian once asked, is it easy to love God? And the other Christian responds, well, I think that doesn't make sense. Someone asked a Christian, is it easy to love God? And the response was, it's easy for those who love God. Okay, it's easy for those who do so. And that might sound a little bit paradoxical, but what that means is, well, it's best described with an allusion to a relationship. So in a relationship, you don't wait for your partner to ask for something that they want. Instead, you gladly research and plan, and you go out of your way to find that which will give her pleasure. And even if that comes at some great cost, or whether that's financial or just some other great inconvenience, it doesn't bother you because you're so happy by the fact that you can bring them something that will give them a bit of pleasure. And that's what it's like for the Christian in their relationship with Christ. It's that love of Christ that constrains us. Once you realise how Christ has given himself for you, you aren't afraid of giving up your freedom and therefore finding freedom in him. Now, I know that some of your experiences with Christians out there will be negative. There will be that authoritarian and dogmatic and hierarchical stuff, those churches that are full of people who are eager to bring you into line doctrinally. And I'm sure some of you have been rendered disillusioned by the combative and exploitative way the Bible can be used to control people and exert will over people's lives in a way that's just not conducive to good living. And I know all about the college deconversion experience, but I also know that those intellectual dispositions that we carry with us are more affected by social interaction than really evidence, the intellectual evidence for or against God. For instance, if the Christians you meet are civic-minded and generous, then you will find the intellectual arguments all the more plausible than if those Christians are just nominal Christians or self-righteous fanatics. See, a lot of the time, the idea that faith in God is preposterous or wrong-headed, it's not a philosophical reflection. Instead, that's a personal reaction. It's a resistance towards a certain individual or person who, in the name of Christianity, was trying to exercise power over you, and you didn't like it. There was something amiss with that experience, and so it sort of led to this reaction in you where I believe you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Now, bear in mind as well, as you're interacting with Christians, that they all come from different walks of life, so I'd be careful about raising a charge of hypocrisy, and painting people with broad strokes, particularly if they have certain issues that they're working out. I mean, sure, Christ himself pointed out hypocrisy, but he did this more so with those self-righteous Pharisees, perhaps those yeah, perhaps those fanatics, you know, but you got to be careful with it, because good character is largely attributable to a loving, stable, safe family and social environment. And these are things that we're not responsible for. Okay, a lot of the people that we meet in life have a history of instability and poor role models and are burdened with deep insecurities and hypersensitivity and a lack of self-confidence. And we don't know the starting point of every Christian. So to mock everyone who's trying to adhere to a higher standard and striving for something greater than themselves, and who on occasion miss the mark, well, that's despicable, And the thing is, we all transcendentalize. If you issue God, then something else like the state or blood and soil will take the place. Because here's something that's true, as pointed out by David Foster Wallace: in the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is no such thing as atheism. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship, and that's the truth. See, if you worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, then you will always feel ugly. And when the time comes and ravages your looks, and when age starts to show, you're gonna die a million deaths before they put you in the ground. And that's just the way the idol works. And that's something I've spoke about previously. But again, I'm sympathetic to the genuine criticism that Christianity reaps. And this is ripped through those less than stellar actors in the faith, and I understand that people could look on a spectrum and see fanaticism at one end and nominalism at the other end, but the problem with looking at it on a kind of spectrum like that is that it can assume that Christianity is something of like a form of moral improvement. And it's so much more than that. It's more than Confucianism or Jordan Peterism. It's about a personal relationship. See, these intense Christians that you see that are more like Pharisees, who think they're right because of their correct doctrine or other superficial aspects, you're right about them, okay? They can be overbearing and fanatically zealous and courageous, but what you'll notice is they're not fanatically humble or sensitive or loving or empathetic or forgiving or understanding as Christ was. And so it becomes clear that Christianity isn't about appearances on a spectrum, but relationship with God. And as Paul said, who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master, a servant will stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. And that just goes back to when you see a Christian who's striving to walk this walk, and you see that there's certain issues in their life. I'm not talking about the fanatic or the self-righteous Pharisee-like believer. I'm talking about the one who's making a sincere effort and yet has their issues. I think it's wrong to paint them or tar them with a broad brush when there's really another way to go about that. I mean, I can understand how an atheist might see that as a win, but again, I do think that is a horrible way to conduct yourself. All the more because they're actually trying to better themselves by subscribing to something. And what are you doing, except trying to tear them down and being an operative of Satan, really, that adversarial part of life. Now, I have to imagine that a video like this is going to attract some attention from those who will have a thought or maybe leave a comment on actual slavery. So I thought I would research a little quote from a social historian here, Rodney Stark, who writes, "Although it's been fashionable to deny it, anti-slavery doctrines began to appear in Christian theology soon after the decline of Rome and were accompanied by the eventual disappearance of slavery in all but the fringes of Christian Europe. When Europeans subsequently instituted slavery in the New World, they did so over strenuous papal opposition, a fact that was conveniently lost from history until recently. Finally, the abolition of the New World slavery was initiated and achieved by Christian activists." So at the end of this, I just want to say that we find ourselves operating on a moral landscape, and all human beings have moral feelings, and this is what we call a conscience. And we believe that there are moral standards that exist apart from us, which we evaluate these moral feelings. And people who laugh at the claim that there's a transcendental moral order, they don't think that racial genocide is just impractical or self-defeating, but they think it's wrong. And when it does happen, we realise that there is this hardening of heart, this searing of conscience, or as it's been described by Jordan Peterson, this ideological possession. But when that genocide does happen, the world unites in recognising it as manifest evil. And I'll end on a quote here from Raymond Giata. Only someone who is religious can speak seriously of the sacred. We may say all human beings are inestimably precious, that they are ends in themselves, that they are owed unconditional respect, that they possess inalienable rights, and of course that they possess inalienable dignity. In my judgment, these are ways of trying to say that we feel a need to say when we are estranged from the conceptual resources, that is God. We need to say it. Not one of these statements about human beings has the power of the religious way of speaking, that we are sacred because God loves us, his children. So I've got no shame in saying I'm a slave of Christ, that master of faith who would die for his enemies. He knew a higher way. Indeed, he is the way, the truth, and the life, and I bet you find him. God bless.